Good evening, Sigma Chi brothers, and all others who are tuned in tonight to our May edition of SigTalks. I'm Jim Cooper, Vice President of the New York City Metropolitan Area Alumni Chapter and Chair for our international program of monthly SigTalks. Tonight, my co-host is Bruce Kastner, who is President Emeritus of the Washington, D.C. Alumni Chapter. The New York City and the D.C. Alumni chapters are partners in producing and presenting SigTalks. Behind the scenes is James Hefner, Grand Praetor for the Hudson Valley Province. James does all of our production work on the SigTalk platform StreamYard that you'll be viewing tonight. This evening's SigTalk promises to be a very entertaining one. We have titled it Adventurous Tourism. The talk features 3 Sigma Chi alumni who have taken excursions during the past year that are not of the everyday variety. Brother Steve Pracht has recently toured South Africa. Brother Joe Beers hiked the Grand Canyon from the top rim to the bottom where the Colorado River is, and of course, back up again. And concluding our talk this evening will be Brother Jeff Murison, who recently spent a week exploring the island nation of Cuba. Each of our Sig brothers will describe their journeys and supplement those descriptions with photos. We'll be coordinating many photos with the dialogue of our speakers, so please bear with us if sometimes that gets a little bit misaligned. So sit back and enjoy what you are about to hear and see. Bruce, please get us started with Brother Pracht.
Thanks, Jim. We're going to begin our journey tonight, our tourist journey tonight with Brother Stephen Pracht. Steve, let's start by learning a bit about you. Can you tell us about where you went to school, your professional life, where you're living now, and also your travel background?
Bruce, I'd be happy to do so. And welcome, brothers. I'm looking forward to be able to share my experiences with you. First of all, as indicated on my little bio, I'm a Penn State graduate, graduated in 1976. Just this past, 3 weeks ago, celebrated the 50th anniversary of my initiation into the Alpha Chi chapter. My professional life has been primarily in the not-for-profit sector, 41 years, the last 16 of which I worked as a major gifts officer for the Sigma Chi Foundation. Now, I've been retired now for 3 years, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. And from a travel standpoint, so far I've visited 48 of the 50 states. I plan on getting to North and South Dakota sometime in a not too distant future to complete that coverage of our country. And I've been to 21 different foreign countries.
That's quite a record, Steve. Tell us, what motivated you to take the trip to South Africa?
I first went to South Africa in 2001 on a business trip. I was there for 3 weeks, and I fell in love with the country. And I've shared my stories with my wife, Darlene, and always wanted to be able to go back and be able to share that experience with her. And this about a year ago saw information on a Travel Zoo email that it came through for a guided tour. And so the timing was perfect for us to be able to go there together. And we spent 2 weeks in South Africa, as well as visiting the Victoria Falls.
South Africa is perceived by most of us to be a kind of a mysterious and very far away place. Do you need a special visa to enter the country?
No, just a passport is all that's necessary. And that's similarly going to Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. All you need is just a standard passport.
Was this a guided tour?
It was. Oftentimes I've done my own planning for trips, but because of the pricing that we saw and the fact I was traveling with my wife, I thought it would be better for us to just go on a guided tour. And there were some couple of days that were open days where we could just plug in our own things that we wanted to do, independent of the tour itself.
Sounds great. To those who might be contemplating a trip to South Africa, what do you recommend in the way of guided tours?
Well, I think for any guided tour that you go on, I would highly recommend if they have a certain scheduled date that you're to arrive for the tour, I would go in at least 1 day in advance of that. And that way you're on the ground, your luggage is there. It gives you a chance to recharge if necessary, depending on the length of travel. And it also gives you the opportunity to explore a little bit on your own before the official tour begins.
Steve, what are some of the things we should know about visiting South Africa?
Well, language, there are 11 official languages across the country. English, though, is commonly spoken. So unless you go off into a really remote part of the country, you should have no issue with communication. Currency is important. The South African rand is their currency. And I just looked up before this chat and saw that right now it's a little over 19 rand to the dollar. So the rand is worth just a little over 5 cents at this time, which means the exchange rate makes South Africa a very, very inexpensive trip once you get there. Now, if you're renting a car, they like to sock it to people renting cars because very few South Africans need to rent cars. But in every other respect, the exchange rate really benefits the U.S. traveler. And then other aspects of the country that to think about, if you are going to rent a car, you're going to drive on the left-hand side of the road and the driver's seat's on the right-hand side of the car. You have to adjust to that. And even if you're not driving, you're a pedestrian, rather than looking to your left when you step out onto a street, you need to be looking to your right because the traffic's coming from the opposite direction. And you don't want to look in the wrong direction and become a roadkill. So those are some important things from a time standpoint. They're 6 hours ahead of us. So right now it is a little after 8 o'clock. So it's a little after 2 a.m. in South Africa. And they're the opposite season to ours. So they're going into their winter months as we're approaching the summer. And then drinking water, definitely drink bottled water.
What kind of food do you recommend that's purely South African?
Well, one of the things that's very popular for South Africans is called biltong, and it's dried beef. You think about beef jerky, except that they make it from a variety of the animals that are common to South Africa. And while it's an acquired taste, it certainly is something that is worth trying out. And then Cape Town, being a coastal town, a lot of seafood is available there. Johannesburg, being inland, you tend to eat more of the beef and meats, things of that sort there. And both cities have a wide range of restaurants, from the everyday go in and get something quick to the 5-star restaurants.
Is South Africa safe for an adventurous tourist who might be watching tonight?
It is, but you always have to be, I think any time you travel, you have to be aware of your surroundings. And particularly in the urban areas, that's no different. So it's just being aware of your surroundings. When you're out on safari, you stay in the vehicle. You don't get out because you don't know what might be hiding around a bush that might decide you look tasty.
Steve, you've brought some wonderful photographs and videos with you tonight. Will you guide us through those, starting with your arrival at Johannesburg?
Be happy to. Thank you. So we arrived into Johannesburg. Again, we got into town a day early. So one of the things we did was schedule a visit to the Apartheid Museum. I'm sure everybody watching this is aware of the apartheid policy that was in place for over 40 years in that country. And we spent 4 hours there. We could have spent more, but I would highly recommend, if you have time in Johannesburg, that you would make a visit there and get to learn more about that history. The next day we drove off on our way to Kruger, and there's some very beautiful landscapes along the way. The 3 Rondavels is one of those areas you can see here. And they call it the South African Grand Canyon, though it's not as spectacular as ours, but still very beautiful. Along the way, you see pictures of school children that were out doing some kind of a visit, and so it was fun meeting them as well. They were high-fiving us as we were walking through, and it's always nice to be able to get that association. So let's move on to the next group of, and this is the God's Window, which they, again, very, very scenic. Then the next grouping is the Kruger Park, and I started with what is known as the Big Five. That's the lion and the leopard, the elephant, the rhino, and the Cape buffalo. And they have sightings of those animals. And here we are in our buggies about to go out to look at the animals. A couple pictures here, the Cape buffalo on the left, and of course, elephants on the right. A lion, male lion. And then these are on the left-hand side, you see a leopard, and the leopard sightings are very rare. They tend to be very shy and stay away from people. And so we were very fortunate because the Big Five is something everybody wants to see. And during our 2 days of safari, we actually saw all 5 of the Big Five both days. And that's very exceptional. This is a cheetah sighting. And it's really fun to watch this animal. It was chasing a gazelle. It lost it, and so it's trying to pick up its scent again. Of course, crocodiles. And we saw 27 species of animals, and you can go on through and see different gazelles here. But 27 species, of course, a giraffe. And the hippos. There are different areas where you saw those, the hyena. And this is a video. We came across this particular hyena. But it's fabulous to see these animals in their natural environment. Kruger Park is the size of the country of Israel. These are wild dogs on the left and kudu on the right. And kudu, by the way, is excellent eating, whether it's in a stew, as a steak, or as a biltong. We stayed at a lodge that was just outside the park. And this is a lobby area, the deck outside. Of course, a swimming pool. And then we were in tents that had the canvas walls to them. So it was pretty rustic, but a lot of fun. I made the bed, by the way. And then here, just other scenery out of looking out our window. And this is a sunrise. We then went to Cape Town. And we're at the Victoria and Alfred Harbor. You see, this is Table Mountain in the background. This is a very spectacular setting. Of course, it's a very, in some respects, modern urban area. The Victoria and Alfred Harbor, where we were, has lots of shops, restaurants, and you can spend a full day there. The Woolworths, I got that because I remember seeing Woolworths as a kid. And then the next few slides gives you an idea of what it's like. This red building is public housing that's been built. And you see these little ramshackle structures in the foreground. And these are structures that have been built by squatters who came to this area, and then they built, and you'll find multitudes of these around the major cities of South Africa. And it may start out with a few that end up becoming thousands of people living in these squatters camps. And then the next is our wine tour. And this wine tour took place outside of Cape Town. The wine route is the longest wine route in the world. And a lot of these places are just within an hour of Cape Town. So it was part of our Cape Town visit that we went to this. We stopped at 2 wineries. And of course, I got an opportunity to do tastings. And this is the town of Franschhoek, which stands for French Corner, and it's in the wine region. The geography reminds me a lot of Napa Valley and Scottsdale combined. So you see the mountains in the background are similar to the mountains that you might see around the Scottsdale area, yet the valleys themselves were very similar to what you'd see in the Napa. So very, very interesting landscapes. Now we're in the town of Stellenbosch, which is a university town, and Stellenbosch University is similar, reminds me of the Stanford campus, and even the town of Stellenbosch reminded me a lot of Palo Alto. And again, this is about 45 minutes outside of Cape Town. And you can move on. After that, we went on a whale watching trip. My wife had never seen a whale, so that's something I wanted to make sure we scheduled in. We're in the town of Hermanus, which is about 2 hours from Cape Town. And the top whale is called the southern right whale, and that's the one that's the most predominant whale in this area. And they come into the bays from July through November during what is their summer months, and then they move on back to or winter months to move back to Antarctica during their summer months to feed. You can move on and just see a few pictures of the whales that we got on the right hand side, and then this one is a little calf that was playing around, coming up to the boat and playing around in the area. And then we went from there to there's several penguin colonies that we stopped by one of those on the way back. Again, Darlene wanted to see penguins out in the wild, so I was able to provide that for her through this trip. And then this is a view going back towards Cape Town. We went overland on the way over, and then we took the coastal road back to Cape Town. Then the next just more pictures of the squatters camps, and you can see what it looks like. If anybody ever saw the movie, I think it's called District 9, that Peter Jackson film, there's an alien spaceship over, I think it's Johannesburg, and a lot of the setting takes place inside of one of these squatters camps. So there's a lot of poverty, and but then there's also relative wealth too. So there's a lot of big differences between the two contrasts. From there, we went to Zimbabwe, and there, for the purpose of seeing the Victoria Falls, a group was there to greet us. And on the left-hand side, the welcome, and I have to look here, but it says Mosi Oatunya, and that is what the local people called Victoria Falls, and it stands for the smoke that thunders. And then on the right-hand side is David Livingstone. He was the first white man to discover Victoria Falls, and he did so in his search for the source of the Nile River. Then different pictures of the falls itself. But it's very vast. And this is a video. This is the main part of the falls, and it stretches. I can't tell you what the exact length is, but it's a very vast. And then you can get a sense of it from this view. On the left-hand side, you'll see where the falls are stronger. That little narrow area will always have water flowing, but we were moving from the wet season into the dry season. And that whole area to the right will eventually dry up completely. The river is very shallow. And so this is the Zambezi River. It's very shallow. And so that whole left section will dry out completely. Now, if I would have been there maybe 2 or 3 months earlier, you would have seen much more water falling across the entire, water flow across the entire falls itself. Then this is a video. We took a helicopter ride, and so this is a video of the falls from the helicopter. And then the last thing we did, because we had an extra day there, we were able to go to an elephant reserve and actually personally feed an elephant. And it's amazing creatures. There's a gentleman who's between me and the elephant, and he always positions himself because they are wild animals. Even though these are used to being around people, they are wild animals. And my wife's telling me about an incident recently where a woman had her arm broken doing the very thing that we are doing right here, when the elephant decided to grab her arm and eat it rather than whatever we were feeding it. So, but still, it was a great experience.
Having just seen that, Steve, does it take a special kind of traveler to include seeing elephants in South Africa on their itinerary bucket list?
Well, I guess that's up to the traveler. I jumped at the opportunity. As I say, we had an extra day and we needed to fill that time, and we certainly weren't going to, sit around the lodge area and hang out at the lodge. We found this opportunity and went out, and it was well worth it. Well worth it.
Looked like a wonderful trip, Steve, and great presentation. Thanks very much for that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Jim, back to you.
Well, just a quick comment that I wanted to make before you move on with Joe Beers, Bruce. Something I forgot to mention in the introduction to our audience. If you have any questions that you'd like to submit for any of our three speakers tonight, please just use the chat or the comment section on your screen, depending on which platform you're on. Submit those questions, and in our final 10 minutes of tonight's presentation, we'll try to tackle those. So, Bruce, back to you for Joe Beers.
Thank you, Jim. Our next traveler is Brother Joe Beers. Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Bruce.
Please tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you initiate? What was your career, and where do you live now?
I attended the University of Arizona, initiated in 1980 in Tucson. Spent a couple of years there. My first 2 years out of college, I worked for past Grand Consul Steve Schuyler. Then I came up to Phoenix. I've been in Phoenix ever since. So I'm a guy that was born and raised in Arizona, and I love it, and I never left, nor do I intend on leaving. It's a great state.
Great place. You are the current organizer and leader of an annual hiking trip that takes place at the world-famous Grand Canyon. I understand that the hike starts at the top, descends to the bottom by the Colorado River, and then all the way back up again. Tell us, how did you get this annual adventure started, and who was involved, and how often do you go?
And actually, I didn't start it. One of my chapter mates, John Krause, and for those of you that were out at Grand Chapter in Arizona a couple of years ago, there's a restaurant called The Mick where Brent Menke, is Significant Sig, is the executive chef. His partner is John Krause, and we were all University of Arizona chapter mates at Beta Phi. John started it about 12 years ago, and he started it with the realization that he was approaching 50 years old and he never hiked the Grand Canyon. And he thought that was kind of lame. So he titled it, I Only Have a Day, which is like, we're just going up for a weekend. We're going to hike in a day. Everybody can fit that into their schedule. And he structured it that way. And then because of the success of the restaurant, neither one of those guys can get away anymore. So I've been on enough of the trips. I volunteered to kind of take it over. So it's really amazing. What we do, it's every year, the last weekend of April. So next year it'll be April 26th through the 28th. And we send out just kind of a blast email to anybody that wants to go. And guys come in from all over the country, and we all go do it together. So we usually have anywhere from 8 to 12 guys. We could double that if we tried probably, but it's just been an amazingly successful and fun time.
It does sound interesting. It also sounds physically challenging. Are most of your participants Sigma Chi's?
Yeah, probably about 2/3 to 75% are Sigma Chi's, and then friends or clients or just people that want to go.
So civilians are allowed then. I'm glad to
absolutely,
know that.
yeah. And
That's
what
great.
we basically do, Bruce, is we rent a cabin in an Airbnb in Williams, Arizona, which is about an hour away from the canyon. It's about 40 minutes from Flagstaff, Arizona. We all show up on Friday. Some guys go play golf on Friday. Some guys just go straight to the Airbnb and set up shop. But the guys that come to hike don't have to do a thing. It's really cheap. We charge $150 to $200 a guy, depending on how many guys we have. That covers all your food, all your lodging. You just got to show up. And so if you want to play golf, great. If you want to go to the cabin, great. And we just kind of have a guys' night of poker or whatever sports are on TV at the time. And then we get up about 4 a.m. and we drive to the Grand Canyon, which is about an hour away. So we leave about 5. We go to Bright Angel Lodge, which is near the entrance of the Grand Canyon on the South Rim. We park, we get on a shuttle, and we go to South Kaibab Trailhead. So we start at South Kaibab, and that's where we go down. So we start with a group. It's freezing cold usually. The top, it's about a 5,000-foot descent. And so the top of the canyon, we use it in April. It can be anywhere from 25 to 35 degrees. It's chilly. So you dress in layers. But the bottom of the canyon is the same temperature as Phoenix. So it can be really hot. So the idea is to kind of get down there and get out of there before it, get some elevation back under your belt before the sun starts beating down on you.
How often do you go, and what times of the year are the best times to set these?
We always go the last weekend in April. There's really 2 times of the year you should hike the Grand Canyon. That is in the spring or late spring. And the other is in the fall, like October. So really April, early May, or October. Other than that, it really is too hot to climb out of there. People do it, and it's really foolish. You can get in a bad way, and nobody's going to come get you.
What's the total mileage of the hike up and down?
All trails list it at about 16.5, but our experience is it's closer to 19. So it's about 19.
I'm guessing it's easier to go down than to come back.
That's a great question because it depends. Guys that have bad knees have a harder time going down. And guys like me that have good knees love going down. I go down all day and I hate going up because I get short little legs and it's a hard climb. And the guys that have bad knees seem to like going up better. So it just varies on the individual.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there a special permit required for this type of group hike?
No, there never has been. The COVID kind of, and I'm sure Murison can talk about this too. The national parks just got hammered during COVID. And so now there are parks that require you get a reservation before you can go. To my knowledge, the Grand Canyon is not there yet. And so you have to have a national parks pass or you pay at the gate. Most of us have annual passes. So and plus we get there so early, there's nobody even at the gate. So it's kind of an honor system anyway. But no, there's no special permits needed. Now, if you were to stay overnight or camp, you do need a back wilderness permit, but we don't do that.
Joe, you brought some pictures with you tonight. As we show them, would you provide your own narrative?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And they're pretty brief, and it's just going to kind of give you a feel for the hike. But we get to South Kaibab Trail, and maybe before we start these pictures, let me just kind of give you a quick comparison. Everybody hears the term rim to rim, and it's a neat thing to say. We do rim to river, which is on the south side. I've done rim to rim, and I'm probably going to do it again in October. But to do rim to rim is a logistical real challenge. You've got to get a hotel room or a campsite on the north rim, which is really challenging. North rim isn't even open yet. We had so much snow this year. And then you've got to get a ride over there. So you've got to have somebody that's not hiking that's going to drive. And then they got to drive the car all the way around to the south rim to meet you. It's a neat hike. It's a little bit longer. You start about 1,500 feet higher, and it's beautiful. But the hike up is exactly the same as on the south rim. Whereas when we do the south rim, you just drive into the park, you're in and out, and you're done in a day. And it's just logistically way easier to do. And it's either North Kaibab Trail and rim to rim or South Kaibab Trail, which is what we do. And they're both spectacular. So, and I just tell you, as we go into these pictures do the Grand Canyon no justice whatsoever. You've really got to be there. Even if you just stand on the edge and look out at it, it is like nothing you can imagine. It's just something you've got to see in person. The pictures don't do much justice. So anyways, we start at South Kaibab Trail, and the next picture will be the very top of South Kaibab Trail. And you can see the switchbacks. So this is literally the very beginning of the trail. And the entire trail is a lot like this. It's just a lot of switchbacks kind of going straight down these cliff sides. So if you have, a phobia about ledges or heights bother you, it can be a challenge. My wife will not do this hike because it's terrifying to her. It doesn't even, I don't even notice. So it just depends. That's something you need to be aware of, though. If you do have a ledge problem, it's probably not a good idea. So anyways, the big first place you stop really going down is Ooh Point. This is, I don't know, probably 30, 40 minutes down, maybe an hour down. And you get an idea of the size of the canyon. It is just amazing. From Ooh Point, we head down. There's a couple other little stops. And generally what we do is we go down as a group on the way down. So if there's 10 guys, there's just a lot of camaraderie and talking and picture taking and taking in the beauty of God's creation. And it's really a cool time. It's a different story coming out, but going down, everybody's together and we're having a great time and yucking it up. And it's pretty peaceful. We're peeling off layers immediately. I'm a desert rat, so I hate being cold, but I just figure I'm going to suffer for about 10 minutes and then I'm going to be fine. And I don't have to carry a bunch of gear all day. So I usually dress pretty light. But we head on down. And then this is the only picture I've got on South Kaibab. At the bottom of South Kaibab, you'll go through a tunnel that's maybe, I don't know, probably 50 feet, not very, very long. And you come out onto this Kaibab bridge. So you actually come out, if you look at the picture on the far left-hand side, you can see a little black hole where you come out. That's where you come out of the hike. You'll come down that ridge and then you cross the river, and we're now on the Phantom Ranch side of the river. And you take a left off of this bridge and you go about 2 miles to Phantom Ranch. On the way, the next picture will show, these are actually two past consuls. John Comedina on the left was consul of Arizona in about 2012, I think. And then my son, Bobby Beers, just finished his term as consul at Montana State. So they were boiling hot. They jumped in the river. The river is freezing cold. I don't go anywhere near it. But these guys did and went and got dunked, and I guess they're in the club, I guess. The next stop after this is Phantom Ranch. And Phantom Ranch, there's kind of a novelty here. This is a little store and restaurant that's here. You cannot get food here unless you have pre-ordered it. All the supplies come in by mule, and it's the only post office in the United States that sends postcards by mule. So it's kind of a novelty to show up there, buy a postcard, and send a postcard home from the bottom of the Grand Canyon to somebody, and it comes out by mule. But usually we get down to here. There's water here. One of the reasons we go down South Kaibab Trail, Bruce, is because there's no water. There's nowhere to get water on all the South Kaibab Trail. So you got your Camelback on, and you're fine to get down to here. We refill for water at Phantom Ranch. Some guys will change your socks and put on some fresh socks here, eat a sandwich, do whatever. But it takes about 4 hours to get to here, unless you really want to fly. You can get down there faster, but we usually take about 4 hours. So if we hit the trailhead about 6:30, we're here about 10:30, and now it's like, okay, sun's going to be starting to beat down, so we got to get moving. The next move is to go to Bright Angel Trail, and at Bright Angel Trail we do it's a different bridge. We usually do a group picture there with the Sigma Chi flag, and then we probably say 100 times on the way down on South Kaibab, it's not a race. On the way out, it's not a race. Everyone's and as soon as you get on the other side of Bright Angel Trail, I'm sorry, if you got 10 or 12 guys, it's a race. Yeah, so you don't want to be the last guy out. So, we always time things from the river to the top, and the river to the top takes the really fast guys like my son or a triathlete guy 3 hours and 15 minutes. Takes me about 4, and our slowest guys takes about 5. So it's very doable. It's a long, hard day. Probably a couple of the highlights coming out. When you first leave, there's a trail that runs along the river where you get these spectacular views along the river here. And probably about a mile past where I'm standing here, it turns left and goes straight up into the canyon. And then the scenery just completely changes. It's lush. There's streams running through, and it's gorgeous. If you're lucky, you'll see some bighorn sheep. If you're unlucky, you'll see a mountain lion. That hasn't happened yet, thankfully. Possibly rattlesnakes, but they're it's a pretty well-traveled trail. So it's pretty doubtful you're going to see any snakes. Next slide we've got is the mules. Now you can take the mule down and mules up. The one thing that's interesting when you're hiking, the mules have the right of way. So it doesn't matter how thin the trail is. When you see mules coming, you have to get out of the way. They are not going to stop, and they will just run you over. And usually the guides are in front, and they'll just give you a heads up. Hey, we're coming through. But that's something you just got to be heads up on. So these guys are coming down Bright Angel, and we'd be going the other way here. And then as we get up a little higher, you can get a really good feel. And probably the one thing that's interesting on the hike out, I kind of look at it like there's a halftime. There's a place called Indian Garden. It's probably about 4 miles up, and it's a good place to rest. There's a lot of trees. There's water. You can fill up your water. We go up Bright Angel because there's water along the way, and then after Indian Garden, it's the hardest part of the hike. So you've been on your feet since 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning. It's now about 1, and the hardest part of the hike is still ahead of you, which is what you see here. There are kind of a 3-lap race from Indian Garden to the top. The first lap is there's a thing called 3 mile, and at 3 mile there's water, and then after 3 mile there's a 1.5 miles and there's water, and then after 1.5 miles you're out. So if you kind of pace yourself thinking it's kind of 3 laps, I'm going to get from Indian Garden, it's a 1.5 miles to 3 mile, and then from 3 mile to 1.5 miles it's a 1.5 miles, and then 1.5 miles and I'm out. It just kind of gives you the right frame of mind. One of the things that we find with guys that do it for the first time is psychologically you have this mindset that, oh my God, I'm hiking the Grand Canyon. This is just enormous. And I hate to say it's really not, but it's really not. And so if you could just keep the mindset that you just kind of got to keep walking, you find yourself out, sooner than you realize. And it's just not that hard. I'm 61 years old. I've done this 10 times. It requires some training, and we give help on training, but it's pretty neat. And the other thing too, along these things, it's really worth talking about is you don't have to do the whole hike with us. We have some guys that will come up and they will just go from the top of Bright Angel down to the 3 mile and turn around and come back. So they get 6 miles in and they've had a great day. There's other guys that will go down to Indian Garden and come all the way back out. And so they go about, that's probably 10 miles. But if you're going to go the whole way, we want to make sure you're ready and you've trained and you've got a hiking buddy. Nobody's going to come get you. So if you don't get out, you just lay down on the trail and go to sleep. So that hasn't happened yet, but it's you see people that you just shake your head. They have no business going down there. But anyways, that's kind of it. The next slide is a friend of mine that's Mitch. We did a different hike up here, which was we cut over before going to the river. So instead of being a 19-mile hike, it was about a 12-mile hike. But this is the top of Bright Angel Trail. So this is where you come out. And when you get here, there's restaurants and lodges and all kinds of good stuff. We get here, and our deal is the first guy out. We leave the key in the car hidden on the car. He goes to the car and gets the ice chest and then pulls it to the top of the trailhead and has a cold beverage for each guy as he's coming out. So for those of us that don't drink, there's water or Gatorade. For those that do, there's cold beer. And it's pretty cool. And then there's a lot of camaraderie at the top. We then get in the car, go back to the cabin, and do a big steak dinner. We used to get Brent Menke doing all the cooking, who's a master chef, which was amazing. But now it's just schleps like us throwing steaks on the grill. And then we get up Sunday morning and drive home. So it's pretty amazing. We've had guys, Mike Myers, a lot of you guys know, came out from New York with a bunch of his buddies, and we all did it together. And guys fly in from all over the country to do it, and it's just a blast. It's a different group every year.
Sounds like you've combined a great Sigma Chi event with a lot of interesting touring as well.
We have, and this is the sign that just kind of tops it off. You can get overheated and you can get heat stroke and you can throw up, and there's a lot of bad things that can happen to you. So the training is it's not that hard. I mean, it's really not. If you're back east and there's no mountains to climb, you can do lunges. And I climb the stairs at my office to train. I got 5 stories. I just do that 3 or 4 times a day, and that gets me in good enough shape to do it. So as long as your lungs are okay and you're in reasonably good shape, it's very doable. So I just encourage everybody to think about it and come see it. If you don't want to do the whole thing, come hang out and check it out. It's a blast. It is just a blast.
I've been out that way before. It's been quite a few years, and it just seems wonderful. But Jim Cooper and I were talking about this in pre-production. We're both on the wrong side of 70, and we're wondering whether or not we would require extra training before we took this trip with you.
I was just reading All Trails, and a guy that had just turned 80 had just finished it, and you'll see guys up there that are doing that like crazy. So no, it's very doable. And there's things that, if you come into Phoenix a couple days early, we could take you on some training hikes just to make sure it's like, yeah, you're going to be fine, or you might not want to do the whole thing. It's really easy to tell. And it's mostly, Bruce, it's a long day on your feet. So if you're a golfer, it's like walking 36 as far as your feet feel, but you're also going up 5,000 feet. So, I mean, It's no joke.
Sure. Joe, I recall that there was a commercial aircraft crashed into the canyon. Are you aware of that? And can you tell us anything about it?
I don't know much about it. I've done a helicopter tour over the canyon. It's spectacular. I don't know really much about that. Google could probably tell you better than I could.
I'm guessing it doesn't happen very often. Otherwise,
No.
we'd be hearing about it.
But I'm married 25 years, and 26 years ago, my wife and I visited up there when we were dating, and there was rumor they were going to stop all the flights over the canyon. So we scurried to get in the helicopter and check it out. So it was pretty cool.
If any of our Sig Talk audience would like to participate in future hikes like this, how would they go about getting information and signing up?
Just email me or look me up in the directory. It's joe.beers, just like the 4 Bruce had before this show, joe.beers at sigmachi.org.
Joe, thanks so much for being with us. It's a great presentation. On a personal note, I want to tell you that you may remember that I was the ritual director for the reinstall of your chapter a bunch of years ago.
I do remember.
And it was a great Sigma Chi experience for me, and I understand they're doing real well these days.
They're doing really well. Thank you. They're killing it down there right now. It's great.
Outstanding. Thanks again, Joe. Jim, back to you.
Okay, Bruce, thanks very much. And really a good job there, Bruce, in getting in prompting Joe and Steve to give some great descriptions of their experiences. We're going to move on now to our third speaker, who is Jeff Murison, who, well, as I said before, visited the island nation of Cuba. But before we get into his trip, Jeff, you know the routine at this point. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your Sigma Chi experience, where you went to school, and some of your travel ventures in the past.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Jim. It's great to be here. Appreciate it. So I went to Dickinson College, Omicron chapter, graduated in 93. For the past decade, I've been a grant trustee. I've kind of done a whole bunch of stuff for the fraternity locally and nationally, and was honored to be awarded the Order of Constantine. That was quite an honor. Really appreciated that recognition. I love to travel. I've been to all 50 states. I'm on a life quest to get to all 63 national parks. I'm just about halfway there with 31 under my belt. And I've been to about 15 cities or countries, excuse me. And sort of photography is a huge part of travel for me. I'm a sort of an amateur photographer, and that's a value add, for me as part of it.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing some of those photos in just a few minutes. So Cuba, to a senior citizen like me, it conjures up a lot of things in my mind. The revolution in the late 50s, the Bay of Pigs fiasco, the Cuban Missile Crisis. For those who are maybe too young to remember that occurred when the Soviet Union started building missile sites which could have launched nuclear bombs in Cuba, only 90 miles from the coast of Florida. Of course, Fidel Castro for all those years, and the world famous Cuban cigars. So many things come to mind. So Jeff, let's start by asking you, it's not a trip that everybody takes. Why did you want to go to Cuba?
Precisely all those reasons. I mean, it was such a unique opportunity. Cuba's so interesting, the convergence of history and politics, economics, culture, the classic cars that are there, the influence of the mob. I mean, it's remarkable. It's got an enormous history. It's one of the first islands that Columbus discovered when he discovered North America. Its history is fascinating. I mean, it was a colony of Spain, and then it sort of became a colony of the United States, or it certainly was under our influence, and then certainly became under the influence of the Soviet Union. So many interesting twists and turns along the way. So much history. A great story I read about J. Edgar Hoover only became head of the FBI because he got a new boss, and that boss went to Cuba to get married. He was totally anti Hoover. He was going to fire him, but he went to Cuba to get married, and while he was there, he died on his honeymoon. And so, he never got a chance to fire Hoover, and the rest was history, right? For Hoover and for America. So, it was just this life opportunity. How often do you get to go to a communist country ruled by a dictator? It's hard. I mean, there was only 12 reasons that the U.S. government lets you go to Cuba. One of which is, and the reason I went was to support the Cuban people, which really meant you had to live with people, live with their citizens, lodge with them, travel with them, study with them, learn from them, eat with them, all to support the Cuban culture and Cuban people. So it was a great opportunity.
Well, that's some great background to start us off, Jeff. Were you part of a tour group, or how did this work as far as getting there?
I was not. Actually, a colleague of mine who knows I love to travel introduced me to a friend of his who takes a small group to Cuba occasionally. And he coordinated it, made it possible, all the arrangements, and sort of knows how to navigate and get around, because it's not easy. And so in the end, it was myself and him and my colleague and two or three others.
Okay. Well, Cuba can't be the most luxurious place you could go. What was the most challenging part of your trip?
It was a challenge. I mean, it's not easy traveling. First of all, there is no cell service or internet. There's no banking for Americans. They have banking services there, but none that we can use. And so those are all hard to overcome. I had to bring $2,000 in ones, tens, fives, and 20s. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, leave it to me. They have the office turn off at the middle of this. And I sort of felt like a drug dealer, like carrying all this money through the Miami airport. I had to get a ton of vaccinations. The rules for the U.S. government, where you can go, where you can visit and spend money, are complex. The hotels and a lot of the hospitality places are owned by the Cuban military. So obviously our government doesn't want us to spend money there and support, the military. So there's a lot of places you can't frequent. And you're required to keep a log of everywhere you go, your agenda, where you spend money, what you do. And you have to keep that for 5 years in case the U.S. government audits you for your visit, to make sure you're in compliance. So it was hard. It's a not easy place to get to.
Well, Jeff, first let me say now, thank you for unfurling the Sigma Chi flag over Cuba. We're glad to see that.
It was a little nerve-wracking. Our flag is very similar to the Ukrainian, right? And Ukrainian flag, and it's a Soviet sort of dominated country. And so I was a little nervous.
Yeah, but you could have possibly gotten arrested for that. So, corresponding to what you've just been talking about, do you need a special permit or visa to go to Cuba?
Not from the U.S., which is surprising. And it's actually kind of easy. You just go online and buy a, American Airlines plane ticket from Raleigh to Miami and Miami to Havana. It was challenging on day of. There was a long online form to get your boarding pass that was in Spanish, asking 100 questions. That was a little challenging, but you didn't need anything from the U.S. We did need to buy a Cuban tourism permit that cost about $100, and you had to have that to board to get to Havana. Interestingly, for decades, since the revolution there, Americans traveling to Cuba didn't get their passport stamped. That was sort of a, frowned upon. But when I was checking out, I said, "Hey, can you stamp my passport and prove that I was here?" And they did happily, and so that was kind of cool.
Now, Jeff, you mentioned earlier that your reason, one of the 12 that are permissible for going to Cuba, was to provide support to the Cuban people. Now, as you interacted with the people there, did you find that they were either pro or anti-American?
They're wildly pro-America. The people are extremely friendly. Incidentally, there's virtually no crime. You don't break the law under a dictatorship, apparently. So it's a very safe country. But the people love Americans. Most Cubans want to get to America. Nearly all have family here already. We were, I won't say celebrities, but we were welcomed very graciously. We had an economics guide for a day that really talked about the economics of Cuba. He was a professor at University of Havana and in economics, and he told us that of his high school class, there were 30 members of his high school class. 27 of them have already left Cuba for America, so there's only him and 2 others left. So everybody's sort of got a plan to get here. Incidentally, he also told us that even as an economics professor at University of Havana, he only makes the equivalent of $24 a month, $24 US a month. Sadly, the Cuban government is very dysfunctional and corrupt, and is failing. And today they let their citizens leave by basically paying about 10 grand so that they can go to Honduras and then move, then come to America. And the sad part is the wealthy and the educated, the healthy, folks are leaving Cuba, and that's just not going to leave very many people left. It's only a country of about 11 million people, so it's pretty sad to see.
So, Jeff, what was it that you saw or experienced that really shocked you?
Sadly, the state of everything. This is a video I took, sort of in their what they called their middle class neighborhood in Havana. But as you can see, it's really distressed. It's basically crumbling, and it's very it's very shocking how hard it is to survive. There the economy is so poor, and everybody admitted openly that the government was corrupt and the economy was failing. It's basically a Soviet style economy that the Soviets the Russians don't even use anymore. It failed in Russia, and yet it's still in effect in Cuba. The government issues everybody food cards and ration books, to get food. The stores are basically empty, a lot. For example, the ration, each citizen gets 5 eggs a month, but to get that ration, you have to have this book and you have to stand in line and hope that you get the food. I mean, it's hard. And it's sort of forces everybody to operate in the black market. They call it the struggle between living with what the government provides and how to survive, they have to sort of borrow, if you want to call it, from somebody else, and then sell stuff in the black market in a trade, barter system. It's tough. It's hard to see.
Well, I'm sure when you get back to the United States, you have a whole new appreciation for what we have here after spending a week in Cuba.
Sure.
What was Havana like, the major capital city?
Sure. It was shocking in so many ways. It's really fascinating. For example, there's just tons of public art everywhere, which you would be, really surprised to see. Yet, the streetscape is, and then the buildings and the homes are crumbling. The classic cars are really cool. But the vehicles all use these old Russian engines that just plume out diesel exhaust. My lungs are just sort of like recovering from that now. And yet the city is crumbling, and when you're out, you see these really cool, there'd be really cool clubs, but they'd be in these crumbling businesses. And so it's a real contrast. In many ways, you felt like the architecture and the city's, structure it looked and felt like Paris after World War II. And then in other ways, it would be really modern. It's got an exceptionally open, accepting gay community. Like I say, the public arts, and then these awesome clubs with, great music and an awesome vibe. It's a real shame because Havana could be the Charleston of the Caribbean. It's got an awesome waterfront and classic, water features. It's got all this interesting Spanish architecture, the classic cars, and yet it's crumbling. The buildings are, frequently held up by plywood, 2x4s. I mean, it's just, shocking. And yet the culture and the history and the food, cigars, rum, lots of rum. Rum is a staple. And we all know this sort of classic Cuban vibe, right? It's real and it's there. And when you're in a bar or restaurant club, it's like being in Miami or New York City. And so it's a shame to see the repression that the government, has over its people.
Yeah, what a mixture of things. And your photos really back up what you're saying. I mean, you literally see the crumbling buildings and the debris on the ground, and then those beautiful cars, which I guess they really know how to take care of there. Yeah. Jeff, what would you say was your biggest adventure during the week you were there?
That had to be going out into the country to see how tobacco and coffee, are produced and grown. And so, we drove out, long drive out into the country, then took a horseback ride through the tobacco fields, and got this great lesson from a legit Cuban citizen, 70-year-old man who's been growing tobacco his whole life and rolling cigars. Seeing him roll a cigar for us, and hearing how the government tells him how many plants he can plant, how many he can grow, how much they'll pay, for his product, and what he can keep for himself. It was really, sort of amazing to see it in real life, and then to have him roll cigars for you and let you try a few. It was pretty cool, and it was great a great life experience.
Well, okay. In concluding your talk here, would you recommend it, and would you go back yourself?
Sure. I'd recommend it. It was a life experience. It was fascinating. It was an adventure. It was certainly educational. But I'd really suggest it as a destination for experienced, flexible, tolerant travelers who can sort of overcome significant challenges and who aren't deterred by things like power outages and loss of hot water or, limited food options. There's a lot of exhaust in the city and sewage and trash, and pretty much 100% chance of getting dysentery. We all got sick there and passed when we got home, and so it's challenging, but I would definitely go back. I mean, it was a life experience. There's great culture and food and nightlife, and the people are super friendly. So if you're interested in, that kind of convergence of all of those, all those kinds of rich, cultural things, it's got great art. It's got great clubs. I'd go back for a weekend, for all of that, and if you like rum, Havana Club, you're going to get plenty of it.
Well, Jeff, that was a great description, and really, I think unlocked a lot of mysteries for a lot of us about, what is Cuba like? Because as Americans, we don't have all that much insight to it, and not many of us have ever been there. So thanks for sharing all of that.
Well, it was my pleasure. It was a great life experience.
So let me turn it to our producer, Mr. Hefner, to see if we have any questions for our three speakers as we could get ready to conclude tonight. One has come in from Rob Petrie. I remember a lake legend, Paradise Lake. Supposedly had great fishing years ago. Still good fishing? I'm not sure who that one was for, though. I guess nobody had any contact with Paradise Lake, so sorry we can't answer that question. Any others, James? Rob Case. Rob is our New York area chapter alumni president. He loves cigars. What can you tell us about the cigars, Jeff?
Well, seeing them rolled by hand, by an authentic, guy who smokes 5 a day, and he told us his father gave him his first cigar at 7, and is in his 70s is pretty remarkable. But you're not technically allowed to bring them back, but how closely the security folks inspect your stuff when you go through customs, I guess remains to be seen.
Okay, so I guess a few of them might have found their way back here. Who knows?
Who knows?
Any other questions, James? No, I think we're done for tonight then. Hey, I want to thank our three speakers for the time and energy that you put into your presentations, putting them together. They were really interesting and provided for a great Sig Talk. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Jeff. And Bruce, as always, I enjoyed co-hosting with you. We don't have pinned down exactly what we're doing in June for the next Sig Talk, but there is a plan for July, which will include 2 SIGs who are very involved with the National Park Service. That would be Jan Jarvis and Will Safroff, who have executive positions and formerly executive positions with the National Park Service. So we'll be putting more out about that in our promotional material. But with that, we're going to sign off for this evening. We thank you for staying with us for the entire Sig Talk. And again, thanks again to our speakers. Good night, everybody.